The marble floors of the estate gleamed under the afternoon sun, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Suzanne Chen stood in the grand foyer, her heart hammering against her ribs as she heard the unmistakable rumble of a car engine in the circular driveway. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not holding what she was holding. Her fingers tightened protectively around the soft bundle in her arms as footsteps approached the front door. She had exactly 3 seconds to make a decision that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The door swung open. Marcus Whitmore froze mid-step, his 6'3" frame filling the doorway. His steel-grey eyes, the same eyes that had graced the cover of Forbes magazine just last month, locked onto Suzanne with an expression she couldn't quite read. Confusion? Anger? Fear? Who the hell are you? His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that made Suzanne's pulse quicken. And what are you doing with my children? Suzanne straightened her spine, forcing herself to meet his gaze, despite every instinct screaming at her to look away. At 26, she was barely half his age, and probably a fraction of his net worth, but in this moment, none of that mattered. I'm the new nanny, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And I'm protecting them. Marcus's jaw clenched. Behind him a woman appeared, tall, elegant, with honey-blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon. Victoria Ashford Whitmore, his wife. The woman whose face Suzanne had seen in countless society pages, always smiling that perfect practiced smile. She wasn't smiling now. Marcus, darling, what's the hold-up? Victoria's voice was silk over steel. Then her eyes found Suzanne, and something flickered across her face. Something cold. Oh, you! The bundle in Suzanne's arms shifted, and a tiny fist emerged from the soft blanket. Without thinking, Suzanne adjusted her hold, cradling the infant closer to her chest. In her other arm, supported by a specially designed carrier, was another baby, twins just 4 months old. Olivia and Emma Whitmore. Ma'am, I need you to step back, Suzanne said, her words directed at Victoria but her eyes still on Marcus. Both of you need to stay where you are. This was insane. This was career suicide. This was probably going to end with her in handcuffs. But Suzanne had made a promise to herself 3 hours ago when she discovered what she'd discovered, and she wasn't about to break it now. Marcus took a step forward. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing. It's not a game, Mr. Whitmore. Suzanne's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I found the bottles. In the nursery. The ones your wife had been preparing. The color drained from Victoria's face. You have no idea what you're talking about, Victoria said, her voice sharp as a blade. Marcus, call security. This woman is clearly unstable. But Marcus wasn't looking at his wife anymore. He was staring at Suzanne with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her, reading every truth and every lie she'd ever told. What bottles? He asked quietly. Suzanne swallowed hard. This was it. The point of no return. The ones with Benadryl mixed into the formula, she said. Enough to keep them sleeping for hours. Maybe enough to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words out loud. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus moved past her without a word, striding toward the kitchen. Victoria started to follow, but Suzanne shifted, placing herself in the path. I said, stay back, Suzanne repeated. You little bitch, Victoria hissed, the polished veneer cracking. You have no idea what you've done. No idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Suzanne shot back. I'm dealing with someone who was drugging her own children, Marcus returned, and in his hand was a small amber bottle. Suzanne recognized it immediately. Infant Benadryl, the kind that was only supposed to be used under strict medical supervision for babies this young. Where did you find this? His voice was dangerously quiet. Your bathroom. Master suite. Hidden behind the Advil. Victoria laughed, but it was a brittle, desperate sound. This is absurd. Marcus, you can't possibly believe this stranger over your own wife. I would never. The very idea is, how much were you giving them? Marcus cut her off, his eyes still on the bottle. The silence stretched. Emma began to fuss, and Suzanne automatically bounced slightly, soothing her. "Answer me, Victoria. Just enough to help them sleep," Victoria said finally, her voice small. "They never sleep, Marcus, never. Do you have any idea what that's like? To be here alone with them, day after day, listening to them cry. You're never here. You're always working, always traveling, always choosing your precious company over your family, so you drugged them." I was exhausted. The words burst out of Victoria like a dam breaking.
"I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time in 4 months.
I have events, obligations, appearances. I can't show up to a charity gala looking like... She gestured helplessly at herself, though she looked immaculate as always. Suzanne felt something twist in her chest. For just a moment, she saw past the designer clothes and the perfect hair to the woman underneath, exhausted, overwhelmed, drowning, but that didn't excuse what she'd done. "You could have asked for help." Marcus said. "I did." Victoria's voice rose. "I told you I was struggling. You hired a night nurse. She lasted 2 weeks because you complained about having strangers in the house. I told you I needed more support, and you bought me a spa membership." A spa membership, Marcus. So instead of talking to me again, instead of seeing a doctor, instead of literally any other option, you decided to drug our children. Victoria's face crumpled. "I just needed them to sleep. Just for a few hours. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I would never hurt them." Suzanne watched Marcus's expression shift through several emotions: anger, betrayal, disgust, and finally, something that looked like profound sadness. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "You're leaving. Tonight." "Marcus, please." "Now, Victoria." She stood there for another moment, her perfect facade completely shattered. Then, without another word, she turned and walked up the grand staircase, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. Marcus waited until she disappeared from view before turning to Suzanne. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the grey threaded through his dark hair. He looked older than his 42 years. "Thank you," he said simply. "For protecting them." Suzanne nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'm going to call my lawyer and my doctor. The police will need to be involved." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is going to be a media nightmare." He reached out, and for a moment Suzanne thought he was going to take one of the babies. Instead, his hand hovered in the air between them. "May I?" It was such a strange question, a father asking permission to hold his own children. But Suzanne understood. After what had just happened, after what he'd just learned, nothing could be taken for granted anymore. She carefully transferred Emma into his arms. Marcus held his daughter like she was made of glass, staring down at her with an expression of such profound love and fear that Suzanne had to look away. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I've been so focused on the company, on the merger, on everything except what was happening in my own home." "You know now," Suzanne said. "That's what matters." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "What's your name?" "Suzanne Chen." "Well, Suzanne Chen, I don't know if you still want this job after tonight, but if you do, it's yours. Whatever salary you want, whatever you need. These girls need someone who will actually protect them." Suzanne looked down at Olivia, still cradled against her chest. The baby had fallen asleep, her tiny hand curled around Suzanne's finger. "I'll stay," she heard herself say. "For as long as they need me," Marcus nodded. "Then we have a lot to figure out, together." As police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, Suzanne realized that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to predict. She'd walked into this house 14 hours ago looking for work. Now she was standing in the eye of a storm that would consume the Whitmore family, the media, and quite possibly her own future. But when she looked down at Olivia, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos erupting around her, Suzanne knew she'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth protecting, no matter the cost. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 6 weeks earlier, Suzanne Chen had stood in the rain outside Portland Memorial Hospital, watching the building where her mother had worked for 23 years. The building where she had died, acute respiratory failure. That's what the death certificate said. But Suzanne knew the real cause was exhaustion, the kind that came from double shifts, from caring too much, from giving everything you had until there was nothing left. Margaret Chen had been a nurse in the pediatric ward. She'd come to America from Taiwan at 19, worked her way through nursing school while cleaning office buildings at night, and dedicated her entire life to two things, her daughter and her patients. The children need advocates, she used to tell Suzanne. Someone who will stand up for them when they can't stand up for themselves. Now she was gone, and Suzanne was alone in a city that suddenly felt too full of memories. The decision to leave Portland had been impulsive. Suzanne had sold the small house her mother had scrimped and saved to buy, packed everything that mattered into her 10-year-old Honda Civic, and driven east with no real plan beyond somewhere else. She'd ended up in Connecticut purely by chance. A flat tire outside Hartford, a kind mechanic who mentioned his sister ran a childcare placement agency, and suddenly Suzanne had an interview. Elite Childcare Solutions operated out of a sleek office building in Stamford. The receptionist had looked at Suzanne's rain-dampened clothes and scuffed sneakers with barely concealed disdain. But the owner, Patricia Hammond, had seen something else. "Your resume is impressive," Patricia had said, reading glasses perched on her nose. 4 years with the Morrison family in Seattle. 3 years before that with another family in Portland. Excellent references. CPR certified, early childhood education certification, fluent in Mandarin. She'd looked up. Why the move? Suzanne had prepared an answer about wanting new opportunities, about the appeal of the East Coast. But sitting in that office, something about Patricia's direct gaze had made her tell the truth. My mother died 2 months ago. I needed to start over somewhere she'd never been. Patricia had nodded slowly. Grief is honest. I appreciate that. She'd closed the folder. I have a position that needs filling immediately. Very high-profile family. The pay is exceptional, but the situation is delicate. Delicate how? The family has been through several nannies in the past year. The wife is particular. The husband is rarely home. And there are twins, 4 months old. Suzanne had felt a pang of recognition. Twins were challenging under the best circumstances. Twins with an absent father and a difficult mother could be a nightmare. What happened to the previous nanny? Patricia had hesitated. That's the delicate part. She left rather suddenly. Family emergency, according to Mrs. Whitmore, but she trailed off, seeming to weigh her words. I've been in this business for 20 years, Suzanne. I know when something doesn't add up. You think she was fired? I think she left before she could be fired. There's a difference. Patricia had leaned forward. Look, I'm going to be frank with you. This job could be a career maker. The Whitmore name opens doors, or it could be a disaster that follows you for years. I'm only offering it to you because you seem like someone who can handle difficult situations. Suzanne had thought about her dwindling savings account, about the motel room she'd been renting by the week, about her mother's voice. The children need advocates. When can I interview? The Whitmore estate had taken her breath away. Suzanne had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment where the heating barely worked in winter. She'd worked for wealthy families before, but nothing had prepared her for this level of opulence. The interview had been conducted entirely by Victoria in a sitting room that probably cost more to furnish than Suzanne would earn in 5 years. Victoria had been charming in that way wealthy people often were, friendly but with an invisible wall that made it clear you were staff, not a peer. Marcus is in Singapore, Victoria had explained, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. Tech industry conference. He's CEO of Whitmore Digital Solutions. Perhaps you've heard of it. Suzanne hadn't, but she'd nodded anyway. The twins are wonderful, of course, but quite demanding. My last nanny simply couldn't handle the pressure. Victoria had smiled, but it hadn't reached her eyes. I need someone resilient, someone who won't abandon ship at the first sign of difficulty. I don't abandon ship, Suzanne had said quietly. Something had flickered across Victoria's face. Approval, maybe, or calculation. "Tell me about your experience with infants." Suzanne had walked her through her qualifications, her training, her years of experience. She talked about the Morrison twins in Seattle, how she'd developed a system for managing two babies with different sleep schedules and temperaments. Victoria had seemed impressed. "You'd be living in, of course. We have a lovely suite above the garage that's been converted into staff quarters. Your own bedroom, bathroom, small kitchenette. All meals provided if you prefer to eat with the household." The salary Victoria had quoted had made Suzanne's heart skip. It was more than she'd ever earned, more than seemed reasonable for a nanny position. "Even for billionaires. That seems quite generous," Suzanne had said carefully. "We value excellence," Victoria had replied smoothly. "And discretion. What happens in this household stays in this household. I'm sure you understand." Suzanne had understood perfectly. Rich people paid extra for silence. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow." That should have been her first warning sign. No background check, no second interview, no meet and greet with the babies first. Just an immediate hire and a non-disclosure agreement that Victoria's lawyer had emailed over within the hour. But Suzanne had needed the job, needed the stability, needed something to fill the gaping hole her mother's death had left. So she'd signed. Her first morning at the Whitmore estate had started at 6 a.m. Victoria had knocked on her door, the staff quarters door. Suzanne had noted, not rung the bell, and led her through the main house to the nursery. The room was a confection of cream and gold, with hand-painted murals of clouds and angels covering the walls. 2 cribs sat side by side, each draped with the kind of organic cotton linens that cost hundreds of dollars. Olivia and Emma had been awake, staring up at the mobile above their cribs, hand-carved wooden birds that probably cost more than Suzanne's car. "This is Olivia," Victoria had said, gesturing to the baby on the left. "She's the fussy one. And Emma, the easy one." She'd said it casually, as if labeling 4-month-old infants was perfectly normal. Suzanne had approached the cribs slowly, letting the babies see her. Olivia had tracked her movement with serious grey eyes. Marcus's eyes, Suzanne would later realize. Emma had kicked her legs and made a gurgling sound that might have been pleasure or might have been gas. "Hello, sweethearts," Suzanne had murmured, her voice automatically dropping into the soft, soothing tone she used with all babies. "I'm Suzanne. We're going to be friends. They need to be fed at 7, Victoria had said. All business now. Formula is in the pantry. I'll show you where everything is. They eat every 3 to 4 hours during the day. Diapers obviously as needed. Dummy time twice a day. No screen time whatsoever. I don't care what the latest parenting trends say." Suzanne had nodded, filing away the information. "I have a luncheon in the city today, then a meeting with my trainer, then dinner with friends. I'll be back around 11. Victoria had checked her watch, a delicate gold piece that probably cost as much as a semester of college. "You'll be fine on your own?" It had been phrased as a question, but it wasn't really. "This was a test. We'll be perfect," Suzanne had said, injecting confidence she didn't entirely feel into her voice. Victoria had left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and Suzanne had been alone with the twins for the first time. The morning had gone smoothly. She'd fed them, changed them, played with them. Olivia was indeed more serious, but Suzanne suspected fussy was just Victoria's interpretation of a baby who needed more engagement. Emma was content to lie on her playmat and bat at hanging toys. But Olivia wanted interaction, eye contact, conversation, stimulation. Suzanne had given it to her gladly. By afternoon, she'd fallen into a rhythm. This was what she was good at. Reading babies' cues, anticipating their needs, creating little routines that made them feel safe and secure. The Whitmore twins were no different from any other babies she'd cared for. Despite the designer onesies and the nursery that looked like something out of a magazine, it was around 5 p.m. when she'd started to notice the oddities. First, there were the cameras. Not unusual for wealthy families, but these were everywhere, in every corner of the nursery, the hallway, the kitchen. always pointed, always watching. Second, there was the locked cabinet in the nursery. Suzanne had noticed it while looking for extra blankets. A small cabinet built into the wall, secured with a combination lock. Strange for a baby's room. Third, and most concerning, was what she'd found when she'd gone to prepare the evening bottles, the pre-made. Bottles in the refrigerator. The ones with the strange smell. The ones that had led to this moment, standing in the foyer with police sirens approaching. Her entire world tilted on its axis, holding two babies whose lives she might have just saved. Suzanne looked down at Olivia, still sleeping peacefully against her shoulder, and then at Emma. Cradled in Marcus's arms, she thought about her mother, about the children who'd needed an advocate, about the promise she'd made to herself when she decided to follow in Margaret Chen's footsteps. Even if it was in a different way, someone has to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Suzanne had stood up. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. Detective Rachel Morrison arrived at the Whitmore estate with two uniformed officers and a Child Protective Services investigator named David Torres. Suzanne watched from the nursery window as their vehicles pulled up the circular driveway, blue and red lights painting the twilight sky in alternating colors. This was real now, irreversibly, terrifyingly real. Miss Chen, one of the household staff, an older woman named Helen, who Suzanne had met briefly that morning, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to tell you the authorities are here. He'd like you to bring the children downstairs." Suzanne's arms tightened instinctively around the twins. "Are they safe?" "The police, I mean. Will they—" "Mr. Whitmore has already spoken with his attorney," Helen said gently. Her eyes were kind, understanding. "You did the right thing, dear. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made Suzanne's stomach clench with anxiety. Downstairs, the grand living room had been transformed into something resembling a crime scene. Detective Morrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, had set up a recording device on the coffee table. David Torres stood near the window, making notes on a tablet. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. Marcus stood near the fireplace, his lawyer beside him, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the minute. When Suzanne entered with the twins, Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Miss Chen," Detective Morrison said, rising from the couch. "I'm Detective Morrison, Greenwich Police Department. I understand you made some serious allegations this evening?" Suzanne nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, ma'am. I'll need you to walk me through exactly what happened. Everything you observed, in chronological order." The detective's tone was neutral, professional, impossible to read, so Suzanne told her story. She explained about finding the pre-made bottles, about the strange smell, about tasting them and recognizing the antihistamine. She described finding the medication in Victoria's bathroom, the dosage on the bottle, her decision to call the agency. "Did you take photographs of the bottles before disposing of them?" Torres asked. Suzanne's heart sank. "No, I didn't think. I just knew I needed to get rid of them, to make sure the babies didn't accidentally get them. So we only have your word that these bottles existed and contained what you say they contained," Morrison said. "It wasn't accusatory, just stating fact." "The medication bottle is still in the master bathroom," Marcus interjected. "Exactly where Miss Chen said it would be." "I can show you. We'll get to that," Morrison said. She turned back to Suzanne. "Had you ever met Mrs. Whitmore before today?" "Yesterday. She interviewed me. And in your interactions with her, did she seem unstable? Erratic? Did she say or do anything that concerned you?" Suzanne thought carefully. "She seemed stressed, tired, but nothing that would have made me think she'd hurt her children." "What changed? What made you suspect the bottles were tampered with?" "My mother was a nurse," Suzanne said quietly. "She taught me to trust my instincts, especially when it comes to children's safety. Something felt wrong. The smell was wrong. So I checked." Torres spoke up. "How long have you worked in childcare, Miss Chen?" 7 years professionally, but I grew up helping my mother. She worked in pediatrics, and in those 7 years, have you ever made allegations against an employer before? The question landed like a slap. Suzanne understood what he was really asking. Are you the kind of person who causes problems? Never, she said firmly. I've had 5 long-term placements. 4 ended because the children aged out of needing a nanny. One ended when the family relocated overseas, and I chose not to move with them. Every family gave me stellar references, which we'll verify, Morrison said. She made a note on her pad. Mr. Whitmore, where is your wife now? Upstairs, packing. Marcus's voice was tight. On my instruction, I'm going to need to speak with her, alone. Marcus's lawyer cleared his throat. My client has been cooperative, detective, but Mrs. Whitmore is also entitled to legal representation before— I'm not arresting anyone, Morrison interrupted. Yet, I'm conducting an investigation into allegations of child endangerment. If Mrs. Whitmore wants an attorney present, that's her right. But the longer this takes, the more complicated it becomes for everyone. There was a loaded silence. Then footsteps on the stairs. Victoria descended like she was walking onto a stage, spine straight, head high, every hair in place. She changed into a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored slacks. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. I don't need an attorney, she said clearly. I have nothing to hide. Morrison gestured to the couch. Please sit down, Mrs. Whitmore. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable hours of Suzanne's life. She was asked to wait in the adjoining room with Torres while Morrison interviewed Victoria. Through the partially open door, she could hear fragments of conversation. Never intended to harm them. You don't understand the pressure. My own mother used to give me a little whiskey to help me sleep. She's been here 1 day. And you believe her over me? Suzanne sat in a designer chair worth more than her car, holding 2 sleeping babies, and wondered if she'd just destroyed an entire family based on her instincts and a suspicious smell. What if she was wrong? What if there was a legitimate medical reason for the medication? What if Victoria had a prescription from a doctor she hadn't mentioned? But then she remembered the taste, the amount, the secrecy. No, she wasn't wrong. Torres finally spoke, his voice low. You look like you're about to be sick. I might be, Suzanne admitted. For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've seen every kind of child abuse and neglect you can imagine. He paused. Your story is consistent. Your concern is genuine. And that medication bottle? It's not prescribed. We checked. Mrs. Whitmore purchased it over the counter 3 weeks ago. Relief and horror washed over Suzanne in equal measure. So I was right. You were right. Torres looked at the babies in her arms. Those 2 are lucky you were paying attention. When Morrison finished with Victoria, she called Marcus in next. Then Marcus's lawyer. Then finally, she came back to Suzanne. Miss Chen, I'm going to be straight with you. This is a mess. Morrison sat down across from her, suddenly looking exhausted. What Mrs. Whitmore did was illegal and dangerous. She's admitted to giving the children approximately half a dose of infant Benadryl mixed into their evening bottles for the past week. A week? Suzanne's voice came out as a whisper. She claims she was desperate for sleep, that she wasn't thinking clearly, that she knew it was wrong but couldn't stop herself. Morrison rubbed her temples. The problem is, the bottles you disposed of are gone. The medication she used is over the counter and available to anyone. Her confession is damning, but without physical evidence of the tampered formula, a prosecutor might have trouble making charges stick. What does that mean? Suzanne asked. It means CPS is going to open an investigation. It means Mrs. Whitmore will be required to move out of the house and have only supervised visitation with the twins until we determine it's safe for her to have unsupervised contact. It means Mr. Whitmore is going to need to make some serious changes to ensure his daughter's safety. Morrison leaned forward. And it means you just made some very powerful people very angry. Mrs. Whitmore's family has connections throughout Greenwich. They're going to paint you as an outsider who overreacted. They're going to make your life difficult. I don't care, Suzanne said, and realized she meant it. Those babies could have been seriously hurt. They could have been, Morrison agreed. Instead, they're safe. Because of you, she stood. You're free to go. We have your contact information if we need anything else. I'm not going anywhere, Suzanne said. Mr. Whitmore offered me the position. I accepted. Morrison's eyebrows rose. You're staying? After all this? Suzanne looked down at Olivia and Emma, both still sleeping peacefully, despite the chaos swirling around them. Olivia's tiny fist was curled around Suzanne's finger, holding on with surprising strength. Someone needs to protect them, Suzanne said simply. And I'm good at my job. After the police left, after Victoria was driven away by her sister who'd arrived in a Mercedes and refused to make eye contact with anyone, after the lawyer departed with assurances that he'd handled the situation, Suzanne found herself alone with Marcus in the now quiet living room. You don't have to stay, he said finally. I meant what I said about the job being yours, but I'd understand if you wanted to walk away. This is going to get ugly. How ugly? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Victoria's father is Harrison Ashford. He owns half the commercial real estate in Fairfield County and sits on the boards of 3 major corporations. Her brother is a state senator. They're going to come after you with everything they have for protecting your children, for embarrassing their family, for causing a scandal, for being the outsider who dared to challenge one of their own. He met her eyes. They'll dig into your background. They'll look for anything they can use against you. They'll make sure you never work in childcare again if they can manage it. Suzanne thought about her mother, about the children who needed advocates, about the promise she'd made, standing in the rain outside Portland Memorial. Let them try, she said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, then we need to talk about how this is going to work. Because as of right now, I'm a single father to 4-month-old twins, and I don't have the first clue what I'm doing. That's why you hired me, Suzanne said. I hired you to be their nanny. But I think, he hesitated, I think they might need more than that. And I think I might need help learning how to actually be their father, instead of just the guy who signs the checks. It was the most vulnerable thing Suzanne had heard him say. This billionaire CEO, this man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was admitting he didn't know how to take care of his own daughters. Then we'll figure it out, Suzanne said. Together. As she carried the twins upstairs to put them to bed for the night, Suzanne realized that everything had changed. She'd come to this house looking for just a job, a fresh start, a way to escape her grief. Instead, she'd found 2 babies who needed her, a father who was lost, and a fight that was only beginning. The real challenge wasn't what she'd face tonight. That had been crisis mode, instinct and adrenaline. The real challenge would be tomorrow and the day after that, and all the days to come. Building trust with Marcus, learning to work as a team, protecting Olivia and Emma not just from immediate danger, but from the long-term damage of a broken family and a scandal that would follow them for years. As Suzanne laid the twins in their cribs and watched them sleep, she made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever the Ashford family threw at her, whatever complications arose from this impossible situation, she would be here for these 2 little girls, because that's what her mother would have done, and because some promises were worth keeping, no matter the cost. The first morning after Victoria left, Marcus Whitmore stood in the nursery doorway at 6 a.m. looking completely out of place. He wore sweatpants and a faded Stanford t-shirt, the most casual Suzanne had seen him, and held 2 empty bottles like they might explode. I thought I'd try feeding them, he said, his voice uncertain. But I can't remember if you said 4 ounces or 6. Suzanne, who'd been awake since 5 when Emma started fussing, bit back a smile. 4 ounces each. And you warm them in the bottle warmer, not the microwave. Hot spots can burn their mouths. Marcus nodded seriously, like she'd just explained quantum physics. Right, no microwave. Bottle warmer. He'd insisted last night that he wanted to be hands-on, that he was done being the absent father who only showed up for photo opportunities. Suzanne had believed he meant it. What she hadn't expected was for him to actually show up at dawn, ready to learn. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in the nursery rocking chair with Olivia balanced awkwardly in his arms, the bottle at completely the wrong angle. Milk dribbled down Olivia's chin as she struggled to drink, her little face scrunching in frustration. "Here," Suzanne said gently, adjusting his arm position. "Support her head more. Tilt the bottle up so the nipple stays full. Otherwise, she's just sucking air." Marcus made the correction, and Olivia immediately settled into a better rhythm. He looked down at his daughter with an expression of wonder mixed with terror. "How do you make it look so easy?" 7 years of practice, Suzanne said, feeding Emma with the practiced efficiency of someone who could probably do it in her sleep. "You'll get there. Before they graduate high school." Despite everything, the stress, the uncertainty, the looming threat of the Ashford family, Suzanne laughed. "Probably before they graduate kindergarten." It was a small moment, a tiny crack in the tension that had filled the house since the police left. But it felt important somehow, like maybe this impossible situation might actually work. The feeling lasted exactly 3 more hours. At 9:30, Marcus's phone rang. Suzanne was in the kitchen preparing bottles when she heard his voice rise in anger from his home office. "I don't give a damn what Harrison thinks. No, you tell him that if he tries to contact my daughters, I'll file a restraining order." "Because she drugged them, Robert. My wife drugged our children, and her family wants to act like I'm the unreasonable one." Suzanne focused on measuring formula, trying not to eavesdrop. But the walls in the Whitmore mansion, despite their expensive construction, weren't soundproof. "Fine, let him threaten me. Let him threaten my company. But if he comes near Olivia and Emma, I'll—" A pause. "Yeah, I know what I'm risking. I know exactly what I'm risking." When Marcus emerged 15 minutes later, his face was drawn tight. "That was my attorney," he said unnecessarily. "Victoria's father wants emergency custody. Claims I'm unfit because I hired an inexperienced nanny with no proper background check." Suzanne's stomach dropped. "I have experience. 7 years, I know, and we can prove it. But Harrison Ashford doesn't care about facts. He cares about winning." Marcus ran both hands through his hair. "He's also threatening to pull his investment fund out of 3 companies I'm partnered with. $40 million gone just to punish me for protecting your daughters. For humiliating his daughter." Marcus's laugh was bitter. In his world, that's the greater crime. The rest of the day was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Marcus had conference calls he couldn't cancel, a board meeting he had to attend remotely, and twin daughters who decided today was the perfect day to be fussy. Suzanne handled the babies, while Marcus tried to save his business empire from his vindictive father-in-law. By 3 p.m., both babies were crying, Marcus was shouting into his phone about stock prices, and Suzanne was seriously reconsidering her decision to stay. Then Emma stopped crying, just stopped mid-wail, and stared at something over Suzanne's shoulder with wide grey eyes. Suzanne turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, still holding his phone, but having muted it. He looked exhausted and overwhelmed, and completely lost. "Can I try?" he asked quietly. "With Emma?" Suzanne carefully transferred the baby to Marcus's arms. Emma, startled by the change, stopped fussing and studied her father's face with intense concentration. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus murmured. "I know, everything's scary and loud and nothing makes sense. I feel the same way." Emma's tiny hand reached up and grabbed Marcus's finger, just held on, like she was anchoring herself to something solid. Suzanne watched something shift in Marcus's expression. The corporate mask cracked, and underneath was just a man falling in love with his daughter for what might have been the first time. "I've missed so much," he said softly. 4 months, and I don't even know what her favorite toy is. I don't know which one likes to be rocked and which one likes to be bounced. I don't know anything. Olivia likes to be rocked," Suzanne offered. "Emma likes to be bounced. Emma likes the yellow giraffe toy. Olivia likes the one that plays music. Emma is more vocal when she's hungry. Olivia gets quiet and serious." Marcus looked at her. "How do you know all this?" "You've been here 2 days, because I pay attention," Suzanne said simply. And because someone taught me that every child is trying to tell you what they need. You just have to listen. That evening, after the babies were down for the night, Marcus appeared in the kitchen where Suzanne was preparing bottles for the next day. I made some decisions, he said without preamble. First, I'm taking a leave of absence from the company. My COO can handle day-to-day operations for the next 3 months. Suzanne almost dropped the bottle she was holding. 3 months? Can you do that? I built the company. I can step away from it, he leaned against the counter. Second, I'm hiring additional staff. A night nurse to help, so you're not on call 24 hours. A housekeeper to handle everything that isn't baby-related. Whatever support you need, Marcus, I can handle. I know you can. But you shouldn't have to. He met her eyes. My wife burned out because I left her alone with too much responsibility and no support. I'm not making that mistake again. The words hung in the air between them. Not making that mistake with you. That's what he meant. Suzanne felt something warm and complicated bloom in her chest. Third, Marcus continued, I want you to teach me everything. How to change a diaper without getting peed on. How to know which cry means hungry versus tired versus wet. How to be their father, not just the guy who pays the bills. That's a lot to learn, Suzanne said carefully. Good thing I'm motivated. He smiled, but it was tired. My daughters deserve better than what I've given them. And I've got 3 months to figure out how to be what they need. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that was equal parts exhausting and rewarding. Marcus proved to be a dedicated student, showing up every morning at 6 to help with the first feeding. He was terrible at it initially, fumbling with diapers, mixing formula at the wrong ratio, panicking every time one of the twins cried. But he kept showing up. Slowly, awkwardly, he got better. By the end of week 1, he could change a diaper in under 3 minutes. By week 2, he'd mastered the bottle angle and could feed both twins simultaneously with Suzanne's guidance. The small victories added up. There was the day Marcus successfully got Olivia to stop crying by singing to her, a terrible, off-key rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star that somehow worked. There was the afternoon he figured out that Emma liked to be held facing outward so she could see everything, while Olivia preferred to be cradled close. There was the evening he managed to get both babies bathed, dressed in pajamas and into their cribs without calling for Suzanne's help even once. I did it, he'd said, appearing in the kitchen with wonder in his voice. I actually did it. You did, Suzanne confirmed, feeling ridiculously proud of this billionaire CEO for accomplishing what millions of parents did every day. But not all moments were victories. There was the morning Marcus had an emergency call with the board and couldn't help with feeding, leaving Suzanne to handle both fussy babies alone while he paced in his office. Talking about quarterly projections, there was the afternoon a reporter showed up at the gate, shouting questions about the nanny who destroyed the Whitmore marriage. There was the evening David Torres from CPS made an unannounced visit, documenting everything from the nursery setup to the bottles in the refrigerator. His presence a reminder that this family was under surveillance. And there was the night Suzanne found Marcus in the nursery at 2 a.m., just watching his daughters sleep. I keep thinking about what could have happened, he said quietly when he noticed her in the doorway. If you hadn't been paying attention. If you hadn't trusted your instincts. If you'd just done what Victoria told you and used those bottles. But I didn't, Suzanne said. They're safe. Because of you. He turned to face her, and in the soft glow of the nightlight he looked younger. Vulnerable. I've built a company worth billions. I've managed teams of hundreds. But I couldn't protect my own daughters from their mother. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have been here. I should have seen that Victoria was struggling. He shook his head. I failed them, Suzanne. As a husband and as a father. I failed everyone, Suzanne wanted to argue, to tell him he was being too hard on himself. But part of what he said was true. He had been absent. He had missed the warning signs, so don't fail them again, she said instead. You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Is that what you're doing? Changing what happens next? Suzanne thought about her mother, about Portland, about the life she'd left behind. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess it is." They stood there in the quiet nursery, two people brought together by crisis, watching over two babies who'd had no say in any of this. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to normal, but it was a start. And sometimes, Suzanne was learning, a start was enough. 3 weeks into their new routine, everything fell apart. It started with an email that arrived at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. Suzanne was in the nursery with Emma when she heard Marcus's phone clatter against his desk from down the hall, followed by a string of profanity she'd never heard him use. She found him standing in his office, staring at his computer screen with an expression that made her blood run cold. What happened? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He just turned the monitor so she could see. The headline blazed across the screen. "Whitmore scandal, nanny with troubled past, seduces grieving billionaire." Sources say Suzanne's vision blurred at the edges. Below the headline was a photo, her photo pulled from somewhere, maybe social media, next to a much larger image of Marcus. The article was from one of those gossip sites that lived in the grey area between journalism and tabloid fiction. "I don't understand," she whispered. Marcus scrolled down, his jaw tight. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and carefully worded accusations. It claimed Suzanne had been fired from her previous position in Seattle for inappropriate conduct. It suggested she'd deliberately targeted Marcus, a vulnerable single father. It quoted anonymous sources, close to the family, saying she'd manipulated the situation to get Victoria removed from the home. Every word was designed to destroy her credibility, while staying just vague enough to avoid a lawsuit. The Morrison family would never say these things, Suzanne said, her voice shaking. "I left on excellent terms. They wrote me a reference letter. I can prove—" "I know," Marcus's voice was steel. "This is Harrison Ashford's doing. He couldn't get emergency custody, so now he's destroying your reputation to force me to fire you. Will you?" The question came out smaller than Suzanne intended. "Fire me?" Marcus looked at her like she'd suggested he set his own house on fire. "Are you insane?" "Of course not." But by noon, it became clear that firing her might not be Marcus's choice. David Torres appeared at the door with his supervisor, a stern woman named Patricia Valdez, who looked like she'd seen every variety of human ugliness and believed all of it. "Mr. Whitmore, Miss Chen," Valdez said without preamble, "we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised." They sat in the living room, the same room where the police had interviewed them 3 weeks ago. Suzanne felt like she was reliving a nightmare. "An allegation has been made," Torres said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Anonymous tip to our hotline claims that Miss Chen has been observed engaging in inappropriate conduct with you, Mr. Whitmore, that the living arrangement is unsuitable for the children." "That's insane," Marcus said flatly. "Suzanne lives in the staff quarters. We're barely even in the same wing of the house most of the time. Nevertheless, we're obligated to investigate." Valdez's expression was unreadable. "The allegation also claims that Miss Chen has been isolating the children, refusing to allow family members to visit." "What family members?" Suzanne asked. "Victoria is only allowed supervised visitation, and she hasn't requested any. No one else has tried to visit. The Ashford family has expressed interest in seeing the children," Valdez said. "They claim their requests have been ignored." Marcus leaned forward. "Let me be very clear. Harrison Ashford and his family are not welcome in this house. Not after what his daughter did. Not after he threatened my business and tried to paint Suzanne as some kind of predator. Your personal feelings about the family don't override their grandparents' rights," Valdez countered. "Connecticut law allows grandparents to petition for visitation. They haven't petitioned. They've launched a smear campaign, which brings us to another concern." Valdez pulled out a tablet. "This article that published today, it makes serious allegations about Miss Chen's employment history." "All lies," Suzanne said firmly. "I can provide documentation, references, background checks. We'll need all of that." Valdez's gaze was piercing. "But you should know that perception matters in these cases. If there's any appearance of impropriety, any suggestion that the children's environment is unstable, we may need to recommend alternative care arrangements." The words hit like a physical blow. Alternative care arrangements. Foster care. Taking Olivia and Emma away from their father because of manufactured scandal. "You can't be serious," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm serious about protecting those children," Valdez replied. "That's my only concern. If you want to keep custody, Mr. Whitmore, you need to be above reproach. That means no hint of scandal, no questionable staff, no—" "Suzanne saved my daughter's lives," Marcus interrupted. "She's the only reason they're safe. And you want me to fire her because my ex-father-in-law is spreading lies?" "I want you to consider how this looks to a family court judge," Valdez said. "A young live-in nanny, a newly single father. Accusations flying. Whether the accusations are true doesn't matter if they create the perception of an unstable home." After CPS left, Marcus immediately got on the phone with his attorney. Suzanne retreated to the nursery, holding Emma close while Olivia napped, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should leave before you ruin more lives. The Ashfords don't forget." Then another, "Gold-digging whore," and another, "Everyone knows what you really are." Suzanne blocked the numbers with shaking hands, but 3 more texts came from different numbers. Someone had gotten her personal information and was coordinating harassment. She was still staring at her phone when Helen appeared in the doorway. "Miss Chen, there are reporters at the gate." 5 of them. "They're asking for comments about your relationship with Mr. Whitmore." Of course there were. That evening, Marcus called an emergency meeting in his office. His attorney was there via video call, along with his publicist, a sharp-eyed woman named Andrea Locke, who'd apparently been dealing with crisis management all day. "The story's been picked up by 6 more outlets," Andrea said, without preamble. 3 legitimate news sites and 3 more gossip blogs. "They're calling it Nannygate. Social media is going insane. 'Fire the nanny' is trending in Connecticut." Suzanne felt sick. "What are our options?" Marcus asked. Andrea looked at Suzanne with something like pity. "The easiest solution is for Miss Chen to resign. Issue a statement saying she's leaving for personal reasons. No hard feelings. The story dies in 48 hours. "No," Marcus said immediately. "Marcus, be realistic. They're going to dig into every aspect of her life. Every relationship, every job, every mistake she's ever made. They'll find something or they'll make something up. This will get worse before it gets better. I don't care. CPS will care. Family court will care. You could lose custody." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Suzanne found her voice. "Maybe I should go." Everyone turned to look at her. "If it means you keep Olivia and Emma, maybe I should just leave. You can hire someone else, someone whose background won't be weaponized against you." "No," Marcus said again, but there was desperation in his voice now. "He's right," Suzanne said quietly. "Andrea's right. This is going to get worse. And I won't be the reason you lose your daughters." She stood up, her legs unsteady. "I'll pack tonight. I can be gone by morning." Suzanne. "Wait," but she was already walking out down the hallway, toward the staff quarters that had briefly felt like home. In her room, Suzanne sat on the bed and let herself cry, great heaving sobs that she'd been holding back for weeks. She cried for her mother, for the life she'd thought she was building, for 2 babies she'd already grown to love. She cried because the Ashfords were going to win. Because money and power always won. There was a soft knock on her door. "Go away, Marcus." The door opened anyway. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Helen, holding a cup of tea and a tissue box. 32 years, Helen said, settling into the chair by the window. "That's how long I've worked for this family. I watched Marcus grow up, watched him build his company, watched him marry that woman even though I could tell she was wrong for him." Suzanne wiped her eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in 32 years, I've never seen him fight for anything the way he's fighting for you to stay." Helen set the tea on the nightstand. "Not for his company, not for his marriage, not even for himself. But for you? He's ready to burn the whole world down. He shouldn't be. I'm just the nanny. No, dear. You're the woman who saved his children when their own mother was harming them. You're the person who taught him how to be a father. Helen paused, choosing her words carefully. You're what this broken family needs to heal. I can't stay if it means he loses custody. And if you leave, those babies lose the one person who's fought for them from the beginning. Helen stood. Sometimes the brave thing isn't leaving. It's staying and fighting back. After Helen left, Suzanne sat in the darkness, torn between competing impossibilities. Stay and risk everything. Leave and abandon the twins to an uncertain future. Her phone buzzed again. Not a threatening text this time, but a news alert. Breaking: CPS opens formal investigation into Whitmore household. It was happening. Everything was crumbling. Suzanne walked to the main house, intending to tell Marcus her final decision. She found him in the nursery, holding both twins, even though they were asleep. Just holding them like he was afraid someone might take them away. I've been thinking, he said without looking up. About what you said. About leaving. Marcus, let me finish. He finally met her eyes and she saw tears there. If you want to go, I won't stop you. I won't ask you to sacrifice your future for my family. But before you decide, I need you to know something. He shifted Emma slightly so he could gesture to the babies in his arms. 3 weeks ago, I didn't know how to hold my own daughters. I didn't know their cries or their favorite toys or what made them smile. I was a stranger to them. And now, his voice cracked, now I'm their father. Really, truly their father. Because you taught me how. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe I would have hired another nanny and gone back to being the guy who just signs the checks. Maybe I would have convinced myself that providing money was enough. He shook his head. You didn't just save their lives that first day, Suzanne. You saved all of us. This whole family. The Ashfords will destroy me, Suzanne whispered. And then they'll destroy you. So we fight them. Together. Marcus stood carefully, still cradling the twins. I have resources they don't. I have truth on my side. And I have you. Someone who's already proven she'll do whatever it takes to protect these girls. Suzanne looked at Olivia and Emma, sleeping peacefully in their father's arms. She thought about walking away, about letting some other nanny step into this chaos, and she knew she couldn't do it. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we fight. Marcus's relief was visible. Thank you. But if this gets worse, if CPS moves toward taking them, then we'll deal with it. Together. Together. It was a promise, a partnership, a line drawn in the sand against everyone who wanted to tear this fragile family apart. Suzanne just hoped it would be enough. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source at 7 a.m. on a Friday, exactly 4 days after Suzanne had decided to stay, and Marcus was attempting to feed Olivia while simultaneously reading legal documents on his tablet, a multitasking failure that resulted in formula on his shirt and an increasingly frustrated baby. Suzanne had just rescued both father and daughter when the doorbell rang. Helen answered it, then appeared in the nursery doorway with an expression Suzanne couldn't quite read. There's a woman here to see you both, Helen said. She says her name is Rebecca Hartley. She was Mrs. Whitmore's previous nanny. Suzanne and Marcus exchanged glances. The nanny who'd quit unexpectedly. The family emergency that had seemed suspicious to Patricia at the placement agency. Show her in, Marcus said. Rebecca Hartley was in her early 30s, with tired eyes and the wary posture of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret. She sat on the edge of the couch in the living room, clutching a leather messenger bag like a lifeline. I saw the news, she said without preamble. The articles about Miss Chen, the accusations. And I couldn't, she took a shaky breath, I couldn't let them destroy another person's life for telling the truth. What do you mean, another person? Marcus asked carefully. Rebecca opened her bag and pulled out a folder. I worked for your family for 11 months, Mr. Whitmore. I left in March, right before the twins were born. Victoria told everyone I had a family emergency, that my sister in Ohio was sick. That wasn't true. My sister lives in California and she's perfectly healthy. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. I left because Victoria threatened to ruin me if I didn't, just like the Ashfords are trying to ruin Miss Chen now. Suzanne leaned forward. What happened? I found something, Rebecca said quietly. Something I wasn't supposed to find. She pulled out a stack of printed emails and handed them to Marcus. Suzanne moved closer to read over his shoulder. The emails were between Victoria and someone named Dr. Lawrence Chen, no relation to Suzanne, apparently a fertility specialist in Manhattan. The correspondence dated back 2 years, long before the twins were born. Suzanne's eyes widened as she read. The emails discussed IVF treatments, genetic selection, and most damningly, Victoria's insistence on procedures without Marcus's knowledge. She told me you were infertile, Rebecca said to Marcus, that the twins were conceived through IVF using donor eggs and donor sperm. She said you were embarrassed about it and didn't want anyone to know. Marcus had gone very pale.
That's not true.
We never discussed IVF. He stopped, seeming to realize something. I was traveling constantly that year. Singapore, Tokyo, London. When Victoria told me she was pregnant, I assumed, look at the dates, Rebecca interrupted gently. According to these emails, she conceived the twins during a month when you were in Europe for 6 weeks straight. The implications hung heavy in the air. Suzanne watched Marcus process the information, saw the moment comprehension turned to devastation. Are you saying they're not mine? His voice was barely audible. I'm saying Victoria orchestrated a pregnancy using methods you never agreed to, Rebecca said. Whether she used your genetic material or not, I don't know. But she definitely didn't want you involved in the decision-making process. Marcus set down the emails like they burned his hands. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you come forward months ago? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Because Victoria found out I'd seen the emails. She called me into her office, very calm, very cold. She told me that if I said anything to anyone, her father would destroy me. He'd make sure I never worked in childcare again. He'd fabricate allegations of abuse, plant evidence if he had to. So you left, Suzanne said. So I ran. Rebecca wiped her eyes. I moved to Boston, changed my name on all my professional profiles, took a job as a preschool teacher instead of a nanny because I was terrified they'd find me. But you came back, Marcus observed, because I saw what they're doing to Miss Chen. The same playbook, smear her reputation, make her seem unstable, force her out through public pressure. Rebecca looked at Suzanne. You protected those babies. You did what I was too scared to do, and I won't let the Ashfords punish you for having courage I didn't have. Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to them. Suzanne could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. Mr. Whitmore, Rebecca said softly, there's more. I made copies of everything I found, not just the emails about the IVF. There are financial records showing Victoria was skimming money from your household accounts. Text messages between her and her mother about maintaining appearances regardless of her mental state. And she pulled out another document. A prescription for anxiety medication that her doctor wrote a note saying she shouldn't take while pregnant or breastfeeding. She was taking it anyway. Jesus, Marcus breathed. I know this is a lot, Rebecca continued, and I know it doesn't change the fact that those are your daughters, biologically yours or not. But it does prove a pattern. Victoria was deceptive, unstable, and willing to put her needs above the children's well-being long before Miss Chen ever arrived. Suzanne's mind was racing. This could change everything with CPS. If we can show that Victoria had a documented history of poor judgment and deception, it undermines every allegation the Ashfords have made, Marcus finished, turning back to face them. His eyes were red but dry. They've been claiming I'm the unstable one, that bringing Suzanne into the house was reckless. But if we can prove Victoria was the problem all along, you flip the narrative, Rebecca said. You show that Miss Chen wasn't some opportunistic stranger causing chaos. She was the person who finally stopped a pattern of behavior that had been escalating for years. Marcus looked at Rebecca for a long moment.
Why should I trust you?
You could be working for the Ashfords. This could be a setup. I thought you might say that. Rebecca pulled out her phone and scrolled to a video file. This is from my last day at the house. I recorded it as insurance, in case Victoria tried to claim I'd stolen something or done something inappropriate. She pressed play. The video showed Victoria in what looked like the master bedroom, her face twisted with rage. You think you're so clever? Victoria's voice came through tinny but clear. You think you can threaten me? My father owns half this state. One phone call and you'll never work again. One phone call and I'll have you arrested for theft, for assault, for anything I want to invent. Rebecca's voice, shaky but defiant. I just want my final paycheck and my reference letter. That's all. You'll get nothing. And if you ever mention what you saw in those emails, I'll make you wish you'd never been born. The video ended. The silence in the room was profound. I have more, Rebecca said. Recordings of phone conversations where Victoria discussed sedating the babies with her mother. Text messages where her mother suggested just a little something to help them sleep wouldn't hurt. The Ashfords knew what she was doing, or at least suspected, and they did nothing. Marcus sank back into his chair, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes.
How do we use this?
Carefully, came a new voice from the doorway. They all turned. Andrea Locke, Marcus's publicist, stood there with her laptop bag and an expression of fierce determination. I've been doing damage control for 4 days, Andrea said, walking into the room, trying to counter the Ashford narrative with nothing but denials and character witnesses. But this, she gestured to Rebecca's folder, this is a nuclear bomb. We use it right. We don't just survive this scandal. We end it. How? Suzanne asked. Andrea sat down and pulled out her laptop. First, we give everything to your attorney and to CPS. This isn't just public relations anymore. This is legal ammunition. Second, we prepare a comprehensive statement with accompanying documentation. Not a denial, an exposé. You want to go public with Victoria's medical records? Marcus looked uncomfortable. That feels necessary, Andrea interrupted. She opened this door when her family started leaking lies about Miss Chen. We're not speculating. We're not making accusations. We're presenting documented evidence of a pattern of deception and instability that directly led to child endangerment. Rebecca nodded. I'll testify. I'll go on record. Whatever you need. The Ashfords will come after you, Suzanne warned. Let them, Rebecca's jaw set. I've been running for 8 months. I'm done being scared of bullies with money. Over the next 3 hours, they assembled a strategy. Andrea would coordinate with Marcus's attorney to present the evidence to CPS before going public. Rebecca would give a formal statement to Detective Morrison. They'd prepare a press release with carefully selected documentation that told the full story without violating privacy laws. This is going to be ugly, Andrea warned. The Ashfords won't just roll over. They'll fight back hard. Good, Marcus said, and there was steel in his voice Suzanne had never heard before. I'm ready for a fight. That evening, after Rebecca had left with promises to return for the official statement, after Andrea had departed with her battle plans and legal briefs, Suzanne found Marcus in the nursery again. He was sitting in the rocking chair, holding a sleeping Emma, just staring at her face. Are they mine? He asked without preamble. Genetically? Does it matter? Suzanne asked gently. I don't know. He touched Emma's tiny hand. They feel like mine. When I hold them, when I feed them, when Emma grabs my finger like this, it feels real, like we're connected. Then you are, Suzanne said. Biology is just one kind of connection. Love is another. Marcus looked up at her and she saw tears on his face. Victoria lied about everything. Our marriage, our family, even our children's conception. How do I trust anything was real? Suzanne knelt beside the chair so she was at eye level with him. You trust what you can see. Olivia needs you. Emma needs you. That's real. The way they calm down when you hold them, that's real. The bond you're building with them every day, that's the realest thing in this whole mess. And you? Marcus asked quietly. Are you real? Or am I going to wake up one day and find out you were just doing a job? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to fully explore. "I'm real," Suzanne said finally. "Everything I've done, I did because those babies needed someone to fight for them. That's real." Marcus reached out with his free hand and touched her face gently. "Thank you. For staying. For fighting. For being what this family needed when we didn't even know we needed it." Suzanne's heart hammered in her chest. They were crossing a line, she realized, moving from employer and employee towards something else entirely. "We should get some sleep," she said, standing up quickly. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." "Suzanne." "Good night, Marcus." She fled to her quarters, heart racing, mind spinning with everything that had happened. The evidence they'd found, the battle ahead. The look in Marcus's eyes when he'd touched her face. Everything was changing. The story was shifting. And Suzanne had no idea where it would end. The counter-offensive began on a Monday morning with a press conference that shook Greenwich society to its core. Marcus stood at a podium in his attorney's conference room, flanked by his legal team, with Rebecca Hartley seated prominently behind him. Suzanne watched from the back of the room, holding a sleeping Olivia, while Helen managed Emma in the adjacent waiting area. 3 weeks ago, my children's nanny discovered that my wife had been sedating our infant daughters with over-the-counter medication, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the barrage of camera flashes. "Since then, my family has been subjected to a coordinated smear campaign designed not to protect children, but to protect a reputation." He methodically presented the evidence Rebecca had provided, redacted enough to protect privacy, but detailed enough to be damning. The emails proving Victoria's deception, the financial irregularities, the recordings of threats, the text messages showing the Ashford family's complicity. "Miss Suzanne Chen saved my daughter's lives," Marcus continued, "and rather than thank her, my former in-laws attempted to destroy her. Today, I'm setting the record straight." The room erupted with questions. Marcus answered each one with calm precision, never wavering, never apologizing for protecting his children. Suzanne watched Harrison Ashford's face on the live newsfeed displayed on a monitor in the corner. The powerful real estate mogul looked like he'd been struck. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time. By noon, the tide had turned. Social media exploded with support for Marcus and outrage at the Ashfords. Protect the Babies replaced Fire the Nanny. News outlets that had gleefully reported the scandal now scrambled to cover the new revelations. The legal victories followed quickly. CPS closed their investigation within 48 hours, citing the comprehensive evidence of Victoria's instability and the clearly safe, loving environment Marcus and Suzanne had created. David Torres personally delivered the news, looking relieved. "Those girls are lucky to have you both," he told them, shaking Marcus's hand and nodding respectfully to Suzanne. The Ashfords' petition for grandparents' visitation was denied. Victoria's supervised visitation rights were reduced to twice-monthly sessions at a neutral location. Pending psychiatric evaluation, Harrison Ashford released a terse statement claiming he'd been misled about the situation and would be re-evaluating family priorities. Translation: he was cutting his losses and abandoning Victoria to save his own reputation. But the real transformation wasn't in the legal victories or the public vindication. It was in the quiet moments at the Whitmore estate as the weeks unfolded. Marcus's 3-month leave of absence became permanent restructuring. He promoted his COO to CEO and took the role of chairman, limiting his active involvement to strategic decisions that didn't require daily presence. For the first time in 15 years, his company wasn't the center of his universe. His daughters were. Suzanne watched him blossom into fatherhood with something that felt dangerously close to pride. He developed his own routines with the twins. Saturday morning, pancake parties, where he'd make breakfast while the girls sat in their high chairs. Sunday afternoon walks around the estate grounds. Bedtime stories every single night, without exception. "You're a natural," Suzanne told him one evening, watching him expertly navigate twin bath time without flooding the bathroom or losing track of rubber duckies. I had a good teacher, he replied, flashing her a smile that made her heart skip. Their relationship had shifted into something neither quite acknowledged, but both felt. It lived in the lingering glances across the nursery, the casual touches that lasted a beat too long, the late-night conversations that had nothing to do with the babies and everything to do with learning each other. Suzanne told him about her mother, about growing up in Portland, about the dreams she'd set aside when Margaret Chen got sick. Marcus shared stories about building his company from a Stanford dorm room, about the loneliness of success, about realizing too late that he'd married someone he barely knew. I thought love was supposed to be dramatic, he said one night as they sat on the terrace after the twins were asleep. Grand gestures and passion and fireworks. Victoria was all of that at first, exciting, unpredictable. And now? Suzanne asked. Marcus looked at her, and the tenderness in his expression made her breath catch. Now I think love is someone who shows up at 6 a.m. to teach you how to burp a baby. Someone who fights for your children like they're her own. Someone who makes the ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Suzanne knew what he was really saying. Knew they were approaching a line that once crossed would change everything. Marcus, I know, he said quietly. I know all the reasons this is complicated. You work for me. We've been through trauma together. It's too soon. People will talk. All of that is true, but it's also true that I'm falling in love with you. He said it simply, like he was stating a fact as obvious as the sky being blue. And I think you feel it too. Suzanne did feel it. Had been feeling it for weeks, maybe since that first night when he'd asked permission to hold his own daughters. But feelings and reality were different things. What about Olivia and Emma? She asked. They need stability, not their father dating their nanny. They need a family, Marcus corrected. A real one. People who love them and love each other. Isn't that what we've been building? Before Suzanne could answer, a cry came from the nursery monitor. Emma, awake and fussy. The moment broke, but the conversation lingered between them like an unfinished sentence. Over the following weeks, they continued building that family Marcus had described. Helen became an unofficial grandmother, teaching the twins to clap and sneaking them extra cuddles. Rebecca Hartley became a frequent visitor, bonding with Suzanne over shared experiences, and slowly healing from her own trauma. Even Patricia Hammond from Elite Childcare Solutions appeared one afternoon with a fruit basket and an apology. I should have dug deeper into Victoria's history, she told Suzanne. Should have trusted my instincts when things didn't add up. You saved those children, and I almost didn't give you the job because you seemed too young, too inexperienced. I had good training, Suzanne said, thinking of her mother. 6 months after that first chaotic night, Suzanne stood in the nursery, watching 8-month-old Olivia and Emma play on their activity mat. They were so much bigger now, so much more aware. Olivia had started pulling herself up on furniture. Emma had discovered the joy of making raspberries and did it constantly. They were thriving. Happy, healthy, loved. Marcus appeared in the doorway, and Suzanne's heart did that familiar flutter it always did when she saw him. There's something I want to show you, he said, offering his hand. She took it. They'd long since stopped pretending. Casual touches meant nothing, and followed him. Downstairs to his office, on his desk was a stack of legal documents. I met with my attorney today, Marcus said. Had him draw up some papers. Suzanne's stomach dropped. Was he letting her go after all? Had she misread everything? I'm officially adopting Olivia and Emma, Marcus continued. Given the questions about their biological parentage and Victoria's complete withdrawal from their lives, my attorney thinks it's important to legally establish that I'm their father in every sense. No ambiguity, no future custody battles. Relief washed over Suzanne. That's wonderful. There's more. He picked up another document. I'm also setting up a trust fund in your name. Not as payment. Your salary more than covers that. This is different. This is recognition that you're not just their nanny. You're the person who saved their lives and helped raise them. If anything ever happens to me, I want you to be protected. I want you to be able to continue being part of their lives. Suzanne's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, I know you don't need it. But I need to do it, please. She nodded, overwhelmed. Marcus set down the papers and took both her hands. There's one more thing. The most important thing. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Suzanne's heart stopped. I know this is unconventional, Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. I know we've done everything backwards. Most people date before they raise children together. But we're not most people. And what we have, what we've built, is real. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant diamond ring. Suzanne Chen, you walked into my life during the worst crisis I'd ever faced, and you turned it into the greatest blessing. You taught me how to be a father. You showed me what real courage looks like. You made me believe in love again. His voice cracked. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of what you've given my daughters and me? Suzanne looked at the ring, then at Marcus, then through the open office door toward the distant sound of the twins babbling in the nursery. She thought about her mother, about the promise to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, about walking into this house 6 months ago with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart, about 2 babies who'd needed someone to fight for them, about a man who'd learned to put his children first, who'd chosen love over ego, truth over convenience, family over fortune. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes, yes, I'll marry you. Marcus slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home, like the ending of one story and the beginning of another. Upstairs, as if sensing the moment, both babies started crying simultaneously. Marcus and Suzanne broke apart, laughing. Duty calls, he said. Together? She asked. Always together. They climbed the stairs hand in hand, ready to soothe their daughters, ready to face whatever came next. The Whitmore family had been broken, had nearly shattered completely. But sometimes broken things, when pieced back together with love and care and unwavering commitment, became stronger than they'd ever been before. Suzanne looked at the ring on her finger, at the man beside her, at the 2 babies who'd brought them together. She'd come to Greenwich looking for a job. She'd found a family, and sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, in the midst of the greatest chaos, life gave you exactly what you needed, even if it looked nothing like what you'd planned. As Suzanne lifted Emma into her arms and watched Marcus scoop up Olivia, both babies immediately calming at their touch. She knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, protecting the ones who needed her most, loving and being loved in return. Home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.